Well, greetings, friends, fellow citizens, and patriots. I hope you like the new introduction to our podcast. I want to thank Pete Messmer and Mike Lyons for their great work. They're just, members of our organization, supporters, and they felt that, we could professionalize things a little bit and make the open look a little better. And they put together that terrific opening, which we will be using, for the rest of the year. So thank you to those guys. We greatly appreciate it. My name is Tom Zawistowski. I am the president of the We the People Convention. This podcast and our website and everything we do is sponsored by the donors to the We the People Convention. And I want to thank each and every one of you for your generous donations that give us the money we need to do the things that we do to fight for individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Could not do it without you, could not do it with those who don't donate and do things and act on the things we ask them to do to help protect their freedom and liberty and prosperity. So that's this show is all about. I've talked in the past that this is not just a talk show. We're not just here to tell you things. We're here to act. You can't defend your freedom and liberty just by talking. You need to take action. And so we will talk about that in this podcast. So thank you for joining us this week, and please share this with everyone you know. I think you'll find some news and opinions here that you won't get anywhere else. And that's, the whole point here. I know a lot of people are kind of tuning out the news because, there's a lot of bad stuff. There's a lot of lies, a lot of propaganda. And, you tune in this week to get basically a news recap. And I try to look at all the things that are happening and bring to your attention the things that I think are important and directly affect you and me and the rest of our country and our fellow citizens. And then we try to figure out what we can do to help fix some things and act to protect ourselves. So that's what we're going to do. Last week, I have an announcement to make because last week I had told you how excited I was that I was going to be able to start to get back on the road and go out and meet with you and speak around the country. And I announced that I would be going to Huntington Beach, California for a meeting of the Patriots for Liberty Uncompromised on March 26th. And I was very excited about that trip, and I really want to thank Sonia Green for her invitation. Unfortunately, it looks like God has different plans for me going forward. I have to announce that I will not be able to attend that event, though the event will take place. So if you're in California, you're watching this podcast, you're in the Huntington Beach area, if you just go to wethepeopleconvention.org and click on the events tab, you'll see the information for that event and the way to make a reservation. And they are still going to hold the event. Unfortunately, I will not be there. It appears that it doesn't appear, it's certain now that I'm going to have to undergo a heart valve replacement surgery. This appears to be a genetic issue. My brother had to have the same surgery a few years back, and I've been having some issues, and it looks like we're going to have to get our aortic valve replaced. I know that many of you have had this type of thing because it's not that uncommon when you start getting above 65. I know that, many of you know people who've had it, and, we feel that, we will get through it and that we will be better when we're through this, but it will affect my ability to, provide you with some of the services that I provide, that We the People Convention provide during this process. I will keep you posted. We're going to try to keep our podcast going. We'll do what we can during the week to send out emails and things. But I just want you to know that for the next couple months, I'm going to be more limited in my ability to be in the fight with you. That doesn't mean that, you guys can't stay in the fight and keep fighting. And I expect that you will do that. And I will do everything I can to support you in that. Though, as I say, my ability to do so will be limited. And so, I always say God has a plan. We don't know how we, fit into that plan. I trust in God, and this is what, He's decided is my future. So we'll just go with that and do the best we can. I kind of knew that God was sending me a message because I had been working on doing an event where Sidney Powell and General Mike Flynn were going to meet with you all and answer your questions. And we were trying to put that together for April 10th. and we just could not get that together, and it just wasn't working. And we ended up, deciding not to do it, which is something I rarely do. But it just seemed that something wasn't right. And now I know that something wasn't right. And, we probably are going to be having our open heart surgery around that time. So, like I said, God has a plan. And I know I get a lot of prayers from a lot of you all the time anyway. And so, I will appreciate your prayers. There is some risk to this, but, we're confident we can come through it and be bigger and better and stronger. So we'll keep you posted, and we'll do the best we can, to keep the shows, going as regular basis as we can. Okay. So I just wanted to make that announcement. We're going to, start with following up on some other things that we've talked about in the recent shows, because I think it's important not to just let things drop through the cracks. I had told you that I was really excited about Charlie Kirk, who spoke at the Bringing America Back to Life convention in Cleveland. And I just found out that his video is going to be released on the 22nd, in a couple days from this podcast. We're recording this on Saturday, March 20th, 2021. So basically, Charlie's video is going to be available, and I'm going to post it on our website. It's a really good pro-life message. And so, I think you'll really enjoy that, and I'll get that posted as soon as we possibly can. Another thing that, we talked about last week was this issue of the Green Bay officials, the Wisconsin officials, who are, basically gave the keys. And I mean, I wasn't kidding you when I told you that they gave the keys to these activists from New York to allow them to basically cure ballots in Wisconsin. And this case is now moving forward. There's a lot of investigations going, because the question is, how many ballots did they quote unquote cure? Okay. And that was a very close race. And a lot of you guys are writing to me and saying, what are we doing to overturn the election from last year? Okay, from 2020. And the answer is that these court cases are going forward. And I'm going to talk about some more that are happening, but they're not going to overturn the election. And people said to me, we must overturn the election. I don't know how we can do that without violence, without some form of civil war, and we're trying to avoid civil war, because the Chinese and our enemies would take advantage of that. So I know you're still hoping for this, but even in these states where they're starting to find court rulings that are going our way, they're not redoing the ballots in those states. Now, from our standpoint, it's important, as I said, to prove the fraud. Right? We got to prove the fraud. So, all right, these things are happening. And there was a story in Just the News that said, months after Trump complaints, some courts are finding irregularities in 2020. And this one story is about Michigan. This week, the latest ruling came this month in Michigan, where the state court of claims concluded that the Democratic Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson's instructions on signature verifications for absentee ballots violated state law. Benson had instructed local election clerks a month before the November 3rd election to start with a presumption that all signatures on absentee ballots were valid, and only reject those that had multiple significant and obvious inconsistencies. The court, ruled that is not legal, that those ballots should have all been deemed illegal and thrown out. And in Wisconsin, which we were just talking about, this Green Bay case, where the mayor of Green Bay took money from Zuckerberg and gave it to gave it the keys to the hotel where they were doing the absentee ballot certification to Zuckerberg's people. That's the question that comes to my mind: is Zuckerberg and those people going to be charged with election interference? They had no right as non-government employees and non-election people to have anything to do with these ballots. And there was money transacted. Did the mayor of Green Bay and the mayor of Milwaukee and these other cities in Wisconsin, did they participate in election fraud for money? That's got to be found out. But there's been another, court decision in Wisconsin that said, we conclude that the emergency order number 12 did not render all Wisconsin electors indefinitely confined, thereby, I'm sorry. Let me read this again. We conclude that the emergency order number 12 did not render all Wisconsin electors indefinitely confined, thereby obviating the requirement of a valid photo identification to obtain an absentee ballot, the majority court ruled. The court filing indicated nearly 200,000 voters declared themselves permanently confined in the state's spring primary and a marked rise over prior years, and even more did so in the general election. So they basically said, I can vote absentee in Wisconsin because I'm indefinitely confined because of COVID, but the statute doesn't say that. And so all those ballots should have been illegal, but they weren't thrown out. And Biden won Wisconsin by just 20,000 votes when 200,000 people, did this. And then in Virginia, a judge in January approved a consent decree permanently banning the acceptance of ballots without postmarks after Election Day, concluding that the instructions from the Virginia Department of Elections to the contrary in 2020 had violated state law. An election board member in Frederick County challenged the legality of the state's instructions and won through the ruling, though the ruling came after the election. And basically, this is what's happening. They're ruling that there was voter fraud, there were illegal ballots, but now they're not going back and changing the vote count. Now, I don't know how we do that. I don't know that if the legislatures in those states, in Michigan, Wisconsin, Virginia, and hopefully Georgia and others in Arizona, we're still watching the Maricopa thing. I don't know if those legislators could say, okay, now the courts have ruled, we want you to go back and redo the election. Okay, in other words, redo the certified ballots. I don't see that happening, folks. And until that happens, I don't see any way to turn over the election. But again, what's important to us going forward is we have to prove the voter fraud so that we can then have a fair vote in 2022. And I know many of you doubt that's ever going to happen. And this H.R. 1 that's coming down the pike, that they're going to vote on, I think, on Wednesday. This bill, by the Democrats in the federal, law is basically going to say that all this election fraud is now legal. That's all H.R. 1 does, is legalize election fraud. We've got to stop that. How do we stop that? It's in the Senate. The Senate's going to have to stop it. As long as Joe Manchin and I'm sorry, I should look up the woman who's a senator, Democratic senator in Arizona, but as long as Manchin and that senators in Arizona say they won't get rid of the filibuster, there is no excuse for Republicans not getting rid of this, stopping H.R. 1 and the equity bill and the gun bills that are coming and all that. Now, they're making a lot of noise about getting rid of the filibuster, and Mitch McConnell, slapped them around this week saying, don't you dare, don't you try to do that. You will regret it. So we'll see what happens. Now, I do want to say, and people keep saying to me, well, we need to get organized. We need to fight. We are fighting. You're fighting. I'm fighting. People over the country are fighting. We're not just sitting there doing nothing. I showed you last week the protesters in Wisconsin after this story came out about Green Bay. Well, there's buses going to West Virginia, to Joe Manchin's house, from Ohio and Pennsylvania and other states to tell Joe Manchin, we expect you to do what's right for America. Okay? So that's an action that's happening this week. People are acting, and we are fighting the fight. But I do want people to understand that we got to first prove the fraud and get some courts to make rulings like they're making. Hopefully we'll get our hands on some ballots, okay, like they're doing in Maricopa County and New Hampshire. And then we'll be able to actually count the ballots and say, this is how many were fraudulent. But until we do that, we're going to have a tough time here, okay? So let's just be realistic about the fight we're in and keep fighting it with realistic expectations. If there is more we could do, I'd do it. I'd tell you what it is. I don't see anybody with any better ideas, okay? Now, again, stuff from last week. If you remember last week, I told you how ridiculous it was that, Minneapolis had, put out a press release right before the trial for the policeman who was going to who's going to be, his case, who killed George Floyd. They're claiming this policeman for killing George Floyd. Okay. And they were, right before that comes out, they went and tried to put a press release out about the $27 million settlement to the family of George Floyd. Now, as I said last week, that's insane. The trial hasn't happened yet. Why are you doing this? So what happened this week? The lawyer for the policeman came out and said this was leaked intentionally to prejudice the jury pool. There was no reason for this announcement to come out. And the left did it on purpose to create riots, folks. To create riots. That's what they're trying to do. How dare they? How sick is that? So what happened is the judge ruled that they're going to put off the trial. They're going to delay the trial, and they should. And Dick Morris had a video where he said they've got to move this out, completely out of out of Minneapolis, because there's no way the guy can get a fair trial there. I mean, just the fencing around Minneapolis downtown, is a message to the jurors saying, yeah, if you rule the wrong way on this, you're going to get hurt. That's what they're trying to do, is intimidate. You can't let them. And so bravo to his lawyer. Let's move that to someplace else, because you can't get a fair trial in Minneapolis. It's all corrupt. And this action by the city council proves it. Proves it. Now, many of you will remember that I sent out an email. And if you don't get our emails and text messages, guys, you got to do that. Go get them at wethepeopleconvention.org. All right. Go sign up for the videos right on the front. Not the videos, the text messages and emails right on the front. Put in your email address and your phone number. Okay. Because I'll send out these stories almost every day. I send something out for you. Okay. But I did a story that said, how can we have freedom and liberty when we can't believe our eyes? And I talked about this video, this software that was coming out that would let anyone, including people like me and you, make fake videos that look real. Well, this week, the strangest thing happened, and I'm going to play this video for you because it's bizarre. But as you know, the media has been screaming that Joe Biden hasn't met with the press at all since he's been president. And Trump was seeing him every time he walked out the door, right? So this video came out. I want you to watch this video. Watch real careful, and then I'll play it again.
Not at the moment.
Now, watch that. That video came out this week, and I don't know who did it. But watch this video again. And at the very end, when Biden walks up, it looks like he's talking to the press about the crisis on the border, which we're going to talk about next. Okay? But look at the video, and you'll see that his hands move through the microphones. Move through the microphone. Watch this. Watch the microphones. Watch his hands. See how his hands are on top of the microphones? That's a deep fake. That video is not real. Now, I don't know who put that out, and that's the problem. Now, it's a crummy deep fake, right? The software that I talk about, you shouldn't be able to see his hands go through the microphones, right? So whoever did that is a freaking amateur. But what I'm saying is, this is what's coming our way, all right? And this is why it's so frightening, because you're not going to believe what you see. Now, this next video, I think you can believe what you see, because all the major news people have played it. It's been everywhere, and it's very scary. And this is Joe Biden falling 3 times trying to walk up the steps to go to Air Force One. Watch this. Watch this. Falls once, twice, 3 times. That's scary, folks. We've all talked about it. It looks like he's impaired, okay? And yeah, you can say it slipped. The White House is actually trying to say it was the wind, okay? It's not the wind. I mean, he called Kamala Harris President Harris again this week. That's scary. Now, none of us want a President Harris, but I think we need to all understand we're going to get a President Harris. Like it or not, I don't think Joe Biden makes it through a 4-year term. There's no chance, okay? So we just need to understand that this is what's going on. He's a useful idiot. And he can't address the media. He's supposedly going to give a State of the Union speech sometime soon, but it's all just terrible. I mean, he just reads it, and the guy doesn't have a clue what's going on. So just get yourself ready, because those aren't just rumors anymore. This is really what's going on. And what's really going on this week, which has been the big story, is the whole situation on the border. I mean, folks, it's just a disaster. And they, criticized Trump, and they said, Trump was the bad guy and, putting kids in cages. But the fact of the matter is, Joe Biden and his policies and his statements have created a disaster. There was a statement from Tennessee Senator Bill Hagerty, delivered a letter to Biden, and he basically says that Biden's administration today is being urged to level with a nation growing anxious about the historic surge of illegal immigrants across the U.S.-Mexico border and the danger they pose by spreading COVID-19 and taking jobs just as the nation recovers from a pandemic. It's time to level with the American people regarding the nature of the crisis, said Tennessee Senator Bill Hagerty. Hagerty said the administration not being fully transparent or truthful about the crisis. Your administration has demonstrated a complete lack of transparency regarding this crisis, including failing to provide adequate information concerning the migrants who are entering communities throughout the United States as a result of your policies, and repeatedly refusing to even acknowledge that a crisis exists, he wrote in a sharply worded letter. Now, here's the deal, okay? We're now talking about 100,000 people have come across the border, and they are not testing them for COVID. They're talking about as many as 50% of the migrants are affected. They're putting them on buses and sending them to our cities. They're going anywhere they want in the United States. And we're giving them $1,100 to do that of your money, right? Now, what's really scary about this is, while they're keeping us locked down, where they're still in California and places like that, they're still at restaurants at 25% of occupancy and all that. We're in a situation where Dr. Fauci isn't calling this a super spreader event, right? No media are saying not testing these immigrants is a serious threat to our country when we're trying to stop the COVID epidemic, right? But that's the reality of it. And the border, this senator from Tennessee is asking the Biden administration, how many of our border guards have gotten COVID from this? Because our people are having to handle these immigrants, these illegal immigrants coming across the border. It's a full-blown crisis. And finally, the regular left-wing media is starting to jump in on this and demand to get access, because the Biden administration won't even give them access to these places where these children are being held. It's a complete blackout. Why? Because what they're doing is wrong. What they're doing is evil. It's hurting children. The cartels are running this whole thing. They're child trafficking. They're bringing drugs in. That's what the Biden administration is doing. Who voted for that? Yeah, nobody. Nobody voted for that. So we have to take action in the states. And I talked about last week about taking action with the Texas, saying we could finish the wall and their National Guard going to the border. Ron DeSantis took action this week about critical race theory, and I wanted you to see that.
Systems and states. One governor taking a stand when it comes to critical race theory and American history, Governor Ron DeSantis.
Florida civics curriculum will incorporate foundational concepts with the best materials, and it will expressly exclude unsanctioned narratives like critical race theory and other unsubstantiated theories. Let me be clear, there's no room in our classrooms for things like critical race theory. Teaching kids to hate their country and to hate each other is not worth 1 red cent of taxpayer money.
Not worth 1 red cent of taxpayer money. That's exactly right. And so I know many of you have been working on the MB 1619 project and critical race theory in your schools. I know that you've been sending out the FOIA requests that we put on our webpage. I want to report to you that I've been getting information back from some of you. One of the things that was wrong with our FOIA is that some schools are running back and saying, you haven't said what period of time do you want those emails and those materials. So we've changed the FOIA to say, we want any emails or materials you've used since January 1, 2019 until the date of this request. So if you get rejected from your FOIA to your school district, just change that, and that will put them in a position where they've got to respond. I also got someone who sent a letter they sent to a Catholic school, and the Catholic school said, we don't have to do this because FOIAs don't work on private educational systems. We're looking into that because they do take federal money, and so we're trying to figure out whether Catholic schools are subject to FOIA or not. But the point is that we've got to take action on this. All right. You need to do this. You need to go, if you go to our website, wethepeopleconvention.org, right on the front of it, okay, right on the front page, you'll see a button that says stop, the takeover of our schools. You click on that and you can get, links to articles, and a really good article just came out about that this week that said critical race theory is dangerous. Here's how to fight it. And so if you go to that page, if you just go to wethepeopleconvention.org, click on the link, okay, and the first link is a new article that just came out that says, here's how you stop it. And they're saying that we need to stop it by filing lawsuits. And it tells you how to do that. It tells you what the lawsuit says, how you can protect your children with lawsuits, okay? So go to our webpage, click on that, get the FOIAs out there, then let's call our legislators and let's call our governors and say, we want you to do what Ron DeSantis is doing. If they can do it in Florida, why can't you do it in your state? We need to drive this, as Ron DeSantis said, this terrible thing in schools that teach your children to hate their country. Who does that? We can't do that. Let's stop that. So help me, help yourself, help our country, help your community. Go to wethepeopleconvention.org and follow the instructions on this, this story that we're telling you about, that, with all the links where you can stop critical race theory in the 1619 Project in your schools, okay? That's what I need you to do. It's really important. It's something you can do. All right, we're going to take a little break and then we'll be back. You're listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion Podcast, and my name is Tom Zawistowski. The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. All right, we're back, and we pulled the shade down, try to get the sun out of your eyes. Sorry about that. And one of the stories I put out this week that I thought was a very important story, and it says left-wing media finally admits that all the evidence proves that Florida got it right. And it's really good to see that even CNN admitted. Okay, CNN's Jeff Zeleny heads his assessment, but he had to admit that things have turned out well. The governor's gamble to take a laissez-faire approach to coronavirus appears to be paying off, at least politically, at least for now. He acknowledged that DeSantis' governing was getting a second look, and his standing is stronger than other governors across the country. The New York Times and Axios also noticed the governor's success. New York Times on Saturday said, for better or worse, Florida's experiment in returning to life as it used to be offers a glimpse of what many states are likely to face in the weeks ahead. Basically, they're saying that, that they were wrong in New York, they were wrong in California. The evidence is clear that DeSantis had the right, idea. Unlike Cuomo, DeSantis did not mandate that infected patients be admitted to nursing homes, wrote the New York Times. And he pointed out that the official rate of death due to the coronavirus is much lower in Florida than Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo's New York, and the state's economy is faring significantly better than lockdown California. So that was really important because it's time, to start to evaluate this. I mean, think about it. If you're in any kind of a business and you make a major decision, you have to do an after action review. It's been a year now, folks. The data is in. It's real clear. The states that did not shut down, and I showed you last week a chart of those states, the ones that didn't shut down, they've done better than the ones that masked up. That's what we need to learn from this. And yet you still have people holding on, okay, and pretending, that what they did worked. It didn't work. So this was great to see. And this is a short take from Rand Paul taking on Dr. Fauci, Senator Rand Paul taking on Senator Fauci. There's a longer version at wethepeopleconvention.org under the video section. So you want to see the whole thing, but here's a clip.
Worldwide had been infected with the coronavirus, and as of that date, fewer than 5 of these cases had been confirmed by scientists to be reinfections. Scientists interviewed for the article concluded, in most cases, a second bout with the virus produced milder symptoms or none at all. Given that no scientific studies have shown significant numbers of reinfections of patients previously infected or previously vaccinated, what specific studies do you cite to argue that the public should be wearing masks well into 2022?
I'm not sure I understand the connection of what you're saying about masks and reinfection. We're talking about people who have never been infected before.
You're telling everybody to wear a mask, whether they've had an infection or a vaccine. What I'm saying is they have immunity, and everybody agrees they have immunity. What studies do you have that people that have had the vaccine or have had the infection are spreading the infection? If we're not spreading the infection, isn't it just theater?
No, it's
not.
not.
The vaccine and you're wearing 2 masks. Isn't that theater?
No, that's not. Here we go again with the theater. Let's get down to the facts. Okay, the studies that you quote from Crotty and Sete look at in vitro examination of memory immunity, which in their paper they specifically say this does not necessarily pertain to the actual protection. It's in vitro.
And what studies can you point to that show significant reinfection? There are no studies that show
Just let me finish the response to your question, if you please. The other thing is that when you talk about reinfection and you don't keep in the concept of variants, that's an entirely different ballgame. That's a good reason for a mask. In the South African study conducted by J&J, they found that people who were infected with wild type and were exposed to the variant in South Africa, the 351, it was as if they had never been infected before. They had no protection. So when you talk about reinfection, you've got to make sure you're talking about wild type. I agree with you that you very likely would have protection from wild type for at least 6 months if you're infected. But we in our country now have variants that are circulating.
Significant reinfection. What study shows significant reinfection, hospitalization, and death after either natural infection or the vaccine? It doesn't exist. There is no evidence that there are significant reinfections after vaccine. In fact, I don't think we have a hospitalization in the United States after the 2-week period after the second vaccination. We don't have a death in the United States.
See, so there's Rand Paul trying to get Fauci to put up some evidence, prove it, okay? And there is no evidence. And now he's talking about, well, you're vaccinated against the first version of the China virus, right? The Wuhan virus. Yeah, that's what I said, China and Wuhan virus. That even though, you're vaccinated against that, well, there's these variants now. So you should keep wearing a mask. No, Fauci, you were wrong from the beginning. Masks don't work, folks. There's no study showing masks don't work. And this week, what did we find out? Oh, we found out, the thing about 6 feet apart, the 6 feet apart spacing, it's all garbage. There's no scientific evidence for that. And the study that was done, an actual study that was done, it said, we studied people in Massachusetts, children in school, who were 6 feet apart and 3 feet apart. And we found out is that there was almost no statistical variance between the two. So now they're saying at school, you can be 3 feet apart. It's all been a lie, folks. And Fauci is the fool that's been leading the parade of lies. And the people who believe them are paying a heavy price. And it's got to stop. And God bless Rand Paul for calling this guy out for who he is. And all the left-wing media just hated that. Well, they played the clips, and saying, oh, Rand Paul's the fool. Fauci's, the really smart guy. No, he's not. Now, I sent out an article this week that a lot of you found very interesting because I could tell how many readers we had. And it said, experimental COVID mRNA vaccine are hacking the software of life. And Moderna's top scientist says we're actually hacking the software of life. Here's what this article said, and I sent it out to you because I'm trying to find some clarity. I know about Dr. Peppers and all these doctors that are doing. Simone is doing these videos that are out there talking about the virus. Don't take it. It's going to be deadly. It's going to cause all kinds of problems. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't like the fact that they're censoring these people because we need to know what they have to say. Prove them wrong. But in this article that I sent out at WeThePeopleConvention.org, you can get it, it talked about how this Moderna scientist did a TED Talk in 2017. And here's the deal you got to understand. The Moderna and virus or medication and the Pfizer injections, they are not normal viruses. These are experimental drugs. That's what the FDA calls them, okay? They've only been approved as experimental. And so this mRNA, they aren't giving you the virus. They're giving you the instructions to have your body create the antidote for the virus. So they said, where are you? Okay. Imagine if instead of giving the patient the protein of a virus, we gave them the instructions on how to make the protein, how the body can make its own vaccine. He said, because that's what we're doing, is we're giving genetic instructions. Well, the problem with this is this genetic instruction stuff is there's a high propensity for it to also allow cancer cells to develop. It stops your ability to fight cancer. But they've got an answer. Yeah, they've got an answer because then they're going to give you an mRNA shot to fight cancer. And as this article says, that's a great business plan, isn't it? If you were in the business of getting millions of people injected with something that treated one thing but created another problem, you can then keep selling this to people for decades. Is that what's going on here? I think it needs to be questioned. And so, before you take this vaccine, they need to prove it's safe. And so I put this article out there because I know many of you concerned. I had people write and said, I didn't know this. If I had known it, I wouldn't have taken the vaccine. Okay. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm not a doctor. But that article, had some very important information in it where this mRNA is not a vaccine. It's an experimental, DNA, altering piece of medical treatment. And so mRNA isn't, like RNA. And it's giving a message for your body to create the protein. And maybe that works, but what are the side effects? They aren't even going to be done with trials till 2023. So millions of people will be injected with this before we even know. It's frightening. It's medical malpractice. And everybody just keeps assuring you it's okay. How do they know? They don't know. Just like Fauci doesn't know about the 6 feet or the mask. This is going to go down as a devastating period in American history, in world history. I mean, this is literally mass hysteria. This is literally when a nation has a mental illness. That's what we're seeing right now. And Dr. Fauci is the guy that's driving all of this. We are going to rue the day. We are already ruining the day. It's just getting worse. Speaking of getting worse, I posted this story and it says, big corporations will not pay Joe Biden's proposed multi-trillion-dollar tax hike. You will. And I want you to spread this and share this with your friends because they keep saying we're going to tax the rich. No one making over less than $400,000 a year will feel any of this. We're going to tax big corporations, right? It's all a lie, folks. Number one, corporations don't pay taxes. You go, what do you mean? Yeah, that's what's wrong. They don't pay taxes. Where do they get their money? They get it from their customers. You know who pays the taxes for corporations? Their employees and their customers. It's just like people say the government, this $1,400 check from the government. Folks, the government doesn't have any money. They have no money. The only money they have is our money or borrowed money that we have to pay back. This is the lie. And we are so uneducated in our country that people don't know this. Governments have no money. That $1,400 check is them giving you part of your taxes back. It's your money. And as I said last week, when you look at the $1.9 trillion bill, it's costing each of us like $5,600, and they're giving you $1,400 back. You're still out $4,200. It's bait and switch. And now they're going to come up with this multi-trillion dollar, like a $4.1 trillion tax hike, the largest tax increase since 2013, right? So, hey, you can get all your goodies, but don't worry, we're only going to tax the rich. Well, they're already talking about a carbon tax. They're talking about a mileage tax, okay? So how about that? So if you got one of those electric cars they want you to get, well, because you don't pay gas taxes, they want you to pay a carbon tax, okay? That's going to hurt everyone, not just people who make over $400,000 a year. And oh yeah, by the way, they're already backtracking on that. Now it's $200,000, okay? People who make $200,000 are going to be included in this. You're all going to be included in it. We are going to pay for this wet dream from the Democrat communists. And that's all they do is tax and spend. You're seeing it with your own eyes. That's why we voted against them. That's why we don't think they won. Who would vote for this nonsense? No one. And so, these policies are destructive. And here's the next thing. This is good news. Led by Texas and Montana, 21 states are suing the Biden administration over revoking the Keystone XL pipeline. And because they're saying that he doesn't have that authority. They've already passed it. They've already, gone through all the environmental things. You can't just revoke it because you've made all these commitments. And these commitments are unbelievable, okay? I mean, here's what you don't hear about. Here's what nobody wants to talk about if they're pushing the global agenda, right? How about stuff like this? His attempt to cancel the Keystone XL pipeline is an empty virtue signal to his wealthy coastal elite donors. It shows Biden's contempt for rural communities in Montana and other states along the pipeline's path that would benefit from this and support the project, said Montana Attorney General Austin Knudsen. The pipeline states, as well as their counties, local communities, and school districts, stood to gain tens of millions of dollars in tax revenue from the construction and operation of Keystone XL. The total estimated property tax for Keystone XL project in the first full year of operations would be approximately $55.6 million spread across 27 counties in just 3 states, Montana, South Dakota, and Nebraska, the lawsuit states. But the bottom line is 21 attorney generals have joined this, including those in Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Georgia, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Utah, West Virginia, and Wyoming. So the states are fighting back because this isn't helping anyone. They will have no impact on our carbon footprint. You know why? Because they're going to still ship the oil via rail, or they're going to sell it to China, who's the biggest abuser of pollution. This is all political bullcrap. And it's time for us to call bullcrap on it. Thank God these attorney generals are doing it. And we need to support them. So if you're in those states, write to your attorney general, call them and say, that a boy, fight this, okay? And then if your state isn't in there, call your attorney general up and ask them to defend their position. But if you go to wethepeopleconvention.org, you can read the story. You can forward it to your attorney general. You can send it to legislators. But the states are going to have to protect our freedom because nobody else is going to. Okay? And that's happening. And I showed you last week about what Texas is doing. You saw what DeSantis is doing in Florida. We all got to do that. I know many of you know that we support Project Veritas because Project Veritas is fighting for you and is doing the only real journalism, I think. There's a few others, Just the News with Solomon and Sarah Carter and some of those people. But they had a big win this week because they sued the New York Times for slander. And basically, they got a big ruling. Yesterday, Justice Charles E. Wood of the Supreme Court of New York in Westchester County denied the New York Times motion to dismiss in the defamation lawsuit brought forward by Project Veritas. Our lawsuit came to be due to the New York Times lies about Project Veritas' investigation into illegal ballot harvesting taking place in Minnesota during the 2020 election cycle. The New York Times defended calling Project Veritas' Minnesota ballot harvesting videos deceptive by arguing it was simply an unverifiable opinion. But the courts ruled that it was valid, and they now are going to move on to a trial in which Project Veritas said in a tweet, and I love this, that we're going to depose them on videotape and we're going to win. Who's laughing now? Can't wait to be deposing the New York Times about how they, defamed, Project Veritas. This is, again, how we fight back. We got to keep doing it. This story I just love, and I had to share with you because it's kind of fun and kind of funny, okay? Story came out, Colorado's governor has called for an anti-meat proclamation as he goes up in smoke as public begins stockpiling for a statewide barbecue. The governor of Colorado, who's gay and whose his partner is a vegan, declared that they were going to have an anti-meat day in Colorado. And so what happened? Guess what? Meat, beef production, cattle is the number 2 industry in Colorado. So how would you like it if the governor of your state attacked the number 2 industry in your state? Regardless of their personal views, they are public servants. Their job is to serve you. How dare they attack the number 2 industry in your state? And you gotta love the folks in Colorado, and I hope all of you guys barbecue that day, okay? And celebrate. And I understand Nebraska's doing the same thing. Maybe Kansas and some other states will join in and just stick it in their ear, okay? They just stand up for yourselves. That's what we got to do. Now, I know a lot of you are looking for good sources of information, and I think you watch this podcast because it is a good source of truthful information. But I want to share with you a couple of things that that I'm really now very satisfied with as truthful places. I get emails every morning from 2 places that I think are really good. One is from Steve Moore. And there's a website called the Committee to Unleash Prosperity.com. I want you to go to that website and sign up for their emails. The emails that Steve Moore sends out, I don't know who their staff is. And yes, Steve Forbes is behind this and, and all that stuff and the baggage that goes with it. But I'm telling you, every morning, they're giving me some of the best information I get anywhere. Okay? So I highly respect them, and I would like you to sign up for that. The other one is MikeHuckabee.com. And you'd say, wow, that's kind of odd. He's got his TV show and stuff, and he's a bright guy. But I'm telling you, I don't know who's on his research staff, but if you go to MikeHuckabee.com, sign up for his emails. They send one in the morning and one in the afternoon, and they really help me. It's good information. And it's in depth and it's intelligent. So you get the email. You can also read it on his website. But those are 2 good sources of truthful information. I mentioned John Solomon and Just the News. I think they're also very, trustworthy. And I check them every day because he's an investigative journalist. He's not just, regurgitating what other people say. He's getting the facts. And I really, think that's another place you ought to go. So I'm going to wrap up the podcast. Again, I thank you for tuning in. I'm sorry that I'm not going to be able to do as much as I've been doing for the last 12 years for the next couple months because of my illness, but it's going to be okay. All right. And our country's going to be okay as long as we keep fighting, as long as you keep, looking at, what they're doing. As long as you don't get shamed, as long as you speak the truth. If you say, I'm not a racist, you're a racist. When they talk about critical race theory, attack them. When they talk about transgenders, and we're seeing states that are passing these laws against, transgender boys competing against girls, we're going to win that fight. It's insane. You can't let them get you to believe that boys can be girls and girls can be boys. They can't. That's what they're trying to do, is destroy our country, the fabric of our country. You can't be silenced. That's the main thing. And, I was telling someone in an email this week, generals don't win wars. Soldiers win wars. You got to look at this like World War I or World War II or whatever you want. Iraq, Afghanistan, millions of soldiers. It's the one-on-one battles that you fight every day and win that win the war. It's not me telling you to do something. It's not Donald Trump telling you to do something. It's those one-on-one battles. It's like sports. Okay, I coached for a long time. In sports, you look at matchups. If it's basketball or football, I'm trying to look for where I've got a player that's better than their player in this position, and I run plays to exploit that. Well, you're the players on our teams. That's what you do. So fight the fights you can fight and win and that are worth winning. You hear me say that all the time. It's a guiding principle, right? I don't just fight every fight. I look at the fight and I go, is this a fight I can win? And is it worth winning? Because if it's neither of those two things, if it's not both those things, I'm not doing it. So don't argue with idiots. But if you can argue with somebody and win and get an advantage and shut them down, do that. Do that at work. Do that at school. Do that at church. Do that with your neighbors. Do that with your family, right? Find the places where you can be effective and fight the fight at your level. That's how we win, because this is a culture war. And so they can say all this nonsense they want. They can tell you the world's going to end in 12 years if we don't get rid of electricity, right? And fossil fuels. They can tell you that I'm a boy, not a girl. They can tell you all the lies they want. The key is you can't believe them. And if we don't believe them, and if we fight the fight and prove that they're wrong, then we win. That's how you win culture wars. You know how you win culture wars? When all these lefty shows that are on, the Emmys and the Oscars and all that, get these horrible ratings they're getting. No one's watching them. Go look at the ratings for CNN. No one's watching them. You know why? Because we all know they're full of crap. We're not stupid. We're smart. So when they tell you that, this guy that killed the prostitutes, basically the massage parlors in Atlanta, right? And it's a white guy, and 6 of the 8 women that were shot and died were Chinese. And so now right away they're off with the narrative, he's a white supremacist. This was caused by Trump calling it the China virus, and white supremacists are killing Chinese people in the United States. And Kamala the Commie Harris was on TV with, Beijing Joe Biden, okay, to say this is horrible that this happened, which it is. But then they go down this path of it's because we are systemically racist, and we have been racist against Chinese for the whole history of America, going back to the railroads and all that stuff. They're liars. There's no systemic racism. There's some racism. It's minuscule. And they'll quote these things and say, crimes against Chinese people are up 150%. Yeah, they went from 200 to 400 in a country of 330 million. Don't buy the lies. And this is how you can tell how evil these people are. If you are American, if you are a public servant, if you are the president and vice president, what you say is you defend America and you criticize what happened. You say America is not a racist country. We have moved just further than anyone to end racism. And we love and respect all our members of our communities, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, their background, whatever. But this is wrong. And what he did was wrong. And we condemn that. But America's good. But they didn't do that. Your president and your vice president got on your TV and told you that your country's terrible because some nut job killed these people. But guess what? The police said the guy admitted he did it because he has a sex addiction, and these massage places was where he would go to get off And the temptation was driving his sex addiction, and he killed them to end the temptation. That's what the police report says. Do you see how much the lies they do? These are evil people. That's why we don't watch them. That's why we don't listen to them. That's why you listen to this show. That's why you tell your friends about the China hoax. What they won't tell you is the vast majority of these crimes that are being done against Chinese are being done by African Americans in big cities like Los Angeles and New York. See? But white supremacists, white supremacists. Stand up for your culture. Stand up for your beliefs. And don't just reject them in your heart, these lies in your heart. Reject them publicly. Stand up. Call those attorney generals and thank them for fighting, to get the XL pipeline going. Call DeSantis. Write him letters. Go on his webpage and say, way to go with the big tech laws you're doing in Florida and in Texas. And then call your legislators and your governor and say, why aren't you doing that? What is your governor doing to get critical race theory out of your schools? When you send your FOIAs to the schools, you're going to get information. Send those to your governors. And send those to your legislators. Say, House members and senators in your state, look at our schools teaching this crap. Here's the DeSantis video. Stop it. Pass legislation. Fight the fight. A while back, I said that we were, in the Tea Party, we were like fire ants. We were just millions of people who just came out of the ground and attacked you. And a good friend of mine actually made a stained glass image of a fire ant that I keep on my windowsill to remind me that we're fire ants. Because that's who we are. There's way more of us than there are them. And if we just act like fire ants and attack them, we're going to win. Okay? Never doubt it. Because as long as we don't give up, we're going to win. And we're not going to give up. Remember that. All right. Appreciate you tuning in. I expect I'll be able to do one next week. I don't think my surgery is going to be until after that. We'll see how things go. I'll keep you posted. Thank you so much. If you have any comments or questions, be sure to send me, an email at info@wethepeopleconvention.org. That's, I read the emails. Tell people about this podcast and share it with them. We're on, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV. We're on Rumble. We're on YouTube. We're on Apple iTunes. We're on the Buzzsprout. We are, but mostly we're at wethepeopleconvention.org on our servers where they can't stop us. Share the podcast. It doesn't do any good if people don't see it and hear it. Okay? Share the truth. Share the message. And then we'll be back as soon as we can. Thank you again for tuning in. Okay, I don't know if the first part